Hi guys. So today I'm going to go through Lab 2, and this is a tutorial video to help you get started or get finished, or to see if you've got what you've got is correct. So let's start by looking at the assignment. So in this case, we're supposed to use for and while loops, and we learn a little bit about lists and how to add things to lists. So what we want to do in this project is we want to use, first we want a while loop, and we want to ask for the user's name. So we're going to ask for user's name in a while loop. We're going to add this name to our list, and we're going to use this append function that we talked about in the earlier part of the text to add the name to the list. And then when the user enters done, we're going to exit the loop. So the exit condition for the loop is going to be when what the user enters is the word done. So that's going to be our exit condition, our termination condition for our loop. So then after we've done that, we're going to take the list that we've made and we're going to use it in a for loop. Remember, for loops work on lists in Python. So we have a list of names that we've made. We're going to list over the names, and we're going to print out the number of the name, the ordinal position of the name in the list. So there's an example here where I've entered Chuck, Jane, Wally, and then done, and then I print out Chuck, Jane, and Wally. So let's look in Python and see how exactly we would do this. All right, so we know we need a while list. Remember, while lists are pre-tested. So a lot of times what we have to do with while loops is we have to prime them. We have to have some initial set of value there. So it ends up being a little bit of duplicated code. In some languages you can do it a little bit neater than this, but in Python there's really not a good way to do this any better, I don't think. Or at least there's not a way that's not more complicated than. We're just going to do it the simple way. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask the user for a name. We're going to call it, and we're just going to call it name. And we're going to say name equals input, and then we're going to say please enter a name or done to exit, colon, and we're going to put a space in there because we like the spaces, right? So now we're going to start off by initializing and asking you to enter a name. We're going to do that because that's just how we do things in our loops. Remember, we have to sort of prime the while loop. So in the while loop, we're going to say while name, and the exit condition is name is equal to done. So while the name is not equal to the word done, we're going to do this loop. Put a colon at the end, and then enter. All right, so while name not equal to done, we are going to, well, what are we going to do? So we're going to add the name to the list. So the way that we add the name into the list is we're going to have a list called, I don't know, I'm going to call it name list. And we're going to call name list.append, parentheses. And what are we going to append? We're going to append the name that we just got, right? All right, so again, what we want to do here is we want to iteratively write and develop. So what we're going to do is we're going to test this, and we've noticed if you're using the IDE, you notice that there's a red line under name list already, and it says unresolved reference name list, and that is a hint that maybe there's something wrong with this piece of code. But what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and run it and see what happens. So it asks us to enter a name. I enter Chuck, and then we have this this crash. It says name error, name list is not defined. So what does that mean? So basically what it means is we're using this name list. Remember, when you want to declare a variable, you have to declare it on the left-hand side of an assignment station. So we have to say something like name list equals blah, or it's not created yet. That's how we declare and assign, right? So what we've done here is we're using name list.append, and we're trying to append something to the list, but in fact we never created the list. So what we need to do is, like we discussed in the earlier part, we need to create an empty name list. So I'm going to call it name list equals close brackets. And when I do that, you'll see that instantly that little red line disappears. Now the little green line is here. It says I got parentheses. I don't need those in Python, so I'm just going to have it remove them for me. Now we're going to try and see if this works correctly. All right, so we're going to run it. It says enter name, Chuck, and it just sits there and it does nothing. What's it doing? Well, if we look at our code here, what's happened is we have a while loop here where we're looking for done, we were appending the name to the done, and then we're never actually updating the variable name. Remember, what we have is an infinite loop, and the reason is that we need to update the value of name so that it will ask the user for a new name. So what we're going to do that is we're going to just cut and paste that line previously, our little priming line for our loop, and we're going to just put it in there and ask for the user input again inside the loop. So if we had started and we hadn't done this priming loop, right, then the name would be invalid, right? Like there wouldn't be a name that you've entered. Now we could declare name. We could do something like, oh, let's just say I'm going to make name something empty. So name exists now, but it's an empty string, or we put some other string in there, some starter string. But the problem with that is going to be that we're going to append. Well, if you look down in our while loop, it's not going to be equal to done, so this is going to be true. So we're going to execute this, but then we're going to append that empty string into the name. So our name list at that point is going to have an empty string at the beginning of it, which is not what we want to have. So we're just going to go ahead and do that little priming input. I don't like to do it. It makes my code a little ugly, to be honest, but that's just what we're going to do. And so now we are putting everything in a string. We're going to run it. Let's run it and see that it works. So let's see. Chuck, Jane, Wally, done. Oops, I misspelled done. Done. All right, now it ran correctly and we think everything is fine. We're really kind of curious though is actually putting things in the list. So what I'm going to add here, what we can do here, one of the nice things about Python is it can let you do kind of a lot of stuff really easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to print the name list. So we can do this. This is a list. We can actually print these things inside of Python without anything extra, just a regular old print statement. We're going to run this. We're going to do this again. Chuck, Jane, Wally, done. So you see we have Chuck, Jane, and Wally in the list, and that's what it's supposed to be. So some mistakes that people sometimes make is you might put the input in front of the append, but then you're not going to append the first name to the list correctly because you're going to overwrite that first name, and so it's not going to be in there correctly. You could also say, well, why don't I just append it in the starter code up in the beginning when I read it in? Why don't I just append it? And you can do that, but what's going to happen then is, what if the user enters done? What if the first thing they enter is done? If the first thing they enter is done, then your list should have nothing in it. It should be an empty list. And that's okay, that's valid. But if you go ahead and enter it here up at the top before you enter the while loop, then you're never going to test to see if that thing's done. You're going to put the word done in your list, and it's not going to work correctly. All right, so now that we've got that and we're sure that that works, let's go ahead and do the last bit. So what we want to do is want to say for, right? And I'm going to say I, because why not? In, and then we need the name of our list, name list, colon. All right, so now we're going to print the list of names. So this is actually pretty simple. We're just going to type in print, and we're going to print I. And I is the name. Well, let's change this from I. I is a little ugly, right? We don't want to use I. For name in name list, print name. All right, so now we're going to print the names in the name list. Let's run this. Again, we're doing all this incrementally so that we can test things as we go. Chuck, Jane, Wally, done. And it prints Chuck, Jane, Wally. All right, so now all we have to do is we have to add the numbers because we're supposed to print the numbers 1, 2, 3, etc. So to do this, we need to add a variable because there's no counting variable in the for loop. So what we need to do is we need to have a variable that keeps track of which name we're at right now in the list. So we're going to call this count, and we're going to set it equal to 1 because we start at the first name, right? We could set it to 0. There's two different ways. We could either set it to 0 and pre-increment it, or we could set it to 1 and just leave it like this. I'm just going to leave it like this. So then we need to print count, comma, right? And then a period. And we need a space there. And then we don't want to put a space after the period, we want it to format, without the spaces. By default, Python, remember, print will put a space between anything. But what we can do is we can say sep equals an empty string. And now we're good to go, right? Oh, we left off. We didn't want. We left off a comma. There we go. All right, so we left out a comma there. No big deal. So we have count, comma, and then the string dot space, comma, and then name, and then sep. So we think that this is going to work. Let's print it out. Chuck, Jane, Wally, done. All right, so you see when you look at this that it prints 111. So what did we forget? We forgot to increment the count after we print things, right? Count equals count plus 1. So there's a different way to do this. You can write it like this, or you can say count plus equals 1. We discussed this in class. If we run this, those are actually exactly the same things. So now we type in Chuck, Jane, Wally, done, and it prints perfectly. So everything is fine. So I hope you see how you can use loops to do these things, and how you can use lists, and how lists can be really helpful in Python when you use them with loops. In any case, good luck, and thanks for watching.